Okay, so we just did a reactive audio on this business of Richard Dawkins admitting that there's evidence for God, and it brought up a discussion that we're going to have now about the different faith and so.
Well, it just made me wonder.
My question was, while you're formulating your thought there, is this just a question of left brain versus right brain? Left brain, I have to have some sort of concrete proof. Right brain, my intuition tells me such and such is so. Is that what we're looking at here?
I don't know what it is, but maybe I don't know. Like, what is the difference between someone who? I guess there's a commonality between the science guy and the faith guy. I think in the sense that the same thing that gets the guy to believe, say, that gravity might exist and eventually prove it,
Yeah.
that same intuition,
Yeah.
I think the faith guy is saying, I'm getting that same spidey tingling about God.
Aha.
You know what I mean? So it leads you to the same place. It's just that, unfortunately, it's seemingly, I guess, easier to prove the existence of gravity than God. You know what I mean? But
that would make sense.
But it's like they're kind of on the same thread. It's just the science guy seems to have hard time accepting that intuition or anything like that is anything, you know what I mean? Or anything that could lead to something spiritual. So he sort of rejects that part of himself in a weird, or even though that's what led him to discover everything he discovered, you know?
Yeah, well, okay, but I mean, with scientists, I think they will admit to that. They'll say, yes, inspiration exists, and yes, we use it, but then we also have to be able to prove it through some sort of scientific method.
Right.
Part of the problem I have with this is, I read the chaos theory a few years ago, and anybody who's seen Jurassic Park originally, there, what's his name's character there, who was the chaos theory expert.
Right.
You read the chaos theory. Basically, their my understanding of their premise is that the universe, just the physical universe that we're talking about here, is so vast and complex that even with the help of all the computers we can build and all the rest of it, we will never fully understand it. Period. Ever. It is impossible.
Right.
The best we can do, as they used to say, is develop little islands of relative predictability, and that's how we exist. By making little islands of relative predictability in this sea of chaos in which we can interact with this physical universe.
Right.
And bearing in mind also, if you want to talk about that, because we're not even going to talk about God yet. Supposedly we're talking about part of God's creation, the physical universe. But if you believe what the spiritualists are telling us, this is the lowest and lowest vibrational area of God's creation,
Yep.
which goes up through eight more levels, something like that.
Yep.
And each one is bigger, exponentially bigger than the one below it.
Yep.
So we're at the very farthest, if there's a point, as the guy said in the Star Wars, farthest away from the center of the universe, in our case, farthest away from God, we're here in the physical universe.
And that makes me think, that goes back to my thing, though, about for us to become our own little gods, in a sense, right? You know, or like become whatever we are.
Whatever we are.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The furthest away from God
Yeah.
is kind of another way of describing what I was saying, where he has to let you go at a certain point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it goes back to this whole idea of free will and how does it work.
Yeah. And in order to have free will, in a way, God would have to step aside. And like,
Yes.
we're always sitting here, myself included, lamenting, where's God? Why aren't you
Yes.
helping?
Yes.
But maybe it's because we're at that stage, like, you know, where your training wheels are coming off and you have to ride the bike yourself, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he can't, and he himself couldn't know, yes, you're ready to be on your own, until he lets you go be on your own and see if you can be on your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's why we are so far from him, in a sense. Yeah. Maybe we're not really, maybe it's just an esoteric, we're not really far, really, but just in terms of the nature of our relationship at the moment.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that, you know.
No, I think you're onto something. And, because, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of free will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, free will is something you can't ever actually give up. Even if you say, okay, I give up my free will, the next minute you can change your mind. Because you never actually, you can't. It was a gift from God. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
it's yours.
Intrinsic to your nature.
It's built in, and you can't. So they can say, well, you just said you give it up. I say, well, no, I changed my mind. So, and then I have free will, and I can do that. And, the idea of free will is that every bit of God's creation, except whatever human beings are, and let's assume we're part of that milieu somewhere, has no right not to follow the will of God. A dog can only be a dog. A plant can only be a plant. An angel, evidently, can only be an angel. Doesn't mean they can't be sentient or aware or intelligent or any of those things, but they can only be what they are. We have this one thing, which is, yes, we can follow God's program, or no, we don't. And we're the only ones, evidently, in that creation right now that have that.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Just the idea that that's all free will really means, because everything under God's creation is kind of at God's command, right?
Yep.
And the only difference between free will and not free will, you're either under His command, or like you said, you have the choice to turn away from His.
Like you're saying, spread your wings and try and fly and see what happens. And,
Well, the best parallel I can come up with is like a parent-child situation,
exactly, yeah.
where they sort of have to let you go a little bit to let you,
Well, you were saying before, that where there's you're starting to see, there's like fingerprints of God, like all over the place if we look for them. And one of those would be that whole parent-child relationship, which seems so eerily similar to the relationship that we, at least in theory, think we have with God.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very much like a father, or mother, or whatever you want to call it, but like a parental situation. And like I said, that going back to that fingerprints, much like if you had a terrarium with a lizard in it, right?
Yeah.
At least me looking at it, would see, there's, you move this, you move that, you put that there, maybe you even left literal fingerprints. But to the lizard, right, it's not going to be aware of that initially. Anyway, it might eventually go, I don't know. But I feel like it's sort of like that here on this earth. Like, it's just every inch of it is actually reeks of God in a sense. You know what I mean? Like,
Depends on how you look at it.
Just depends on how you look at it. I'm not saying I wish I could see it.
Well, also, like in a terrarium, as you were saying before, if one of those little parameters that you set up for that environment
goes wrong, and by very little.
Yeah.
That's what's so interesting. That I never knew how precise the universe was. It doesn't have a lot of room for error.
No.
And that does make you wonder, like if you have this sea of chaos and then existence is this tiny little thread of where you have to have everything set right in this so exact.
Order.
Yeah, the order of everything has to be so precise. Yeah. It just reeks of intent. Like you just smells of like something's there. Like somebody's mucked around or done something or whatever.
Yeah.